Really good. You really cook better than us. So thank you so much for that.
Tell your mother.
Well, my mother is in Baghdad, so she cannot compete with you now. I'm sure if she's here, she would cook something good for you guys, but she's a little bit far away from here. I wrote something to actually give a speech on, but I'm choosing against some wisdom to not give you a speech about what I went through. I'm actually just going to tell you what I went through and what I think is relevant to your meetings. First, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Ahmed Akeel. It's very hard to pronounce my last name, don't even try. I moved to the US from Jordan. I'm originally from Iraq. I'm going to explain that a little bit more. 3.5 years ago, and I moved to Michigan first in the cold weather suffered for 2 years, and then I moved to Houston for a job, which I got right now, and I'm working. I just got promoted, so everything's going good. Thank you. And then I'm working also with the Humanists of Houston, and this is how I got the connection with Jeff through Vic Wang. And I'm here now to tell you a little bit about what is the country that I was born into, how did it look like throughout the time that I grew up there, and then maybe tell you a little bit also about what I thought of being a refugee is really like. And then also maybe touch on a little bit about the American news media here and there. I'm going to reference them a little bit because I really don't like how the American media kind of treats the subject of refugees. But I'm not gonna, this is not my field of experience, so I'm just giving you, all of this is about my personal view of what I went through. It doesn't represent any Iraqi's point of view. So it's just my point of view, and I'm trying to be as much unbiased as someone can be. Okay, so I was born in Iraq in 1983. The time I was born, everyone hears me? Okay.
Yeah.
By the time I was born, Iraq was already in a war with Iran. It was an 8-year-long war, and the reason I'm mentioning this war, I'm starting by it, is because it somehow created some religious consequences afterwards. Other than the political plots that were behind the scenes, there were some religious connections about that, and I'm going to refer to how it a little bit changed the style of the Iraqi communities. So the community that my parents grew up in was, compared to what the community that I grew up in, was a little bit more liberal. The universities were hardly segregated communities. We had health clubs where we were full of teams of women and men playing tennis, soccer. And then we had nightclubs, we had bars, we had a really busy nightlife. I mean, then one of the streets actually, its name is Abu Nawas, and it's very famous for its nightlife. People would come from Gulf countries and just to experience this nightlife of this street in Baghdad. So this is what their community was like. The community that I grew up in was completely different. I didn't have a fun adult life at all. Sorry. The kind of concept of things that happened is that the rise of the Shia regime in Iran and taking power because of the religious revolution, and then also, we had the dictator Saddam, who was also worried of this Shia regime being developed just on its eastern borders, and its appeal to the Shia dominant component of the Iraqi population. So that gave a sentiment that the government was actually anti-Shia. The government, in my conception, was not really anti-Shia, but was worried that the Shia would form a connection with Iran. And that is my conception of it. By the time, with the war and all the wars that we went through in Iraq, I think religion was used as a way to kind of control people and make them more busy with being conservative, being more busy of having these sectarian discussions or differences. It's easier to control people when you divide them a little bit. And I think it was used at some point in 1993. I was actually the first time I hear about like what is a Sunni or a Shiite, and there are actually two sects of Islam. I never knew that they were. I was in 1993. I was 9 by then. It was like I heard that there are two sects of Islam. I never got what they are actually. But then when I was 13, a person actually came and asked me, "Are you a Sunni or a Shia?" I was like, "I really don't know. What am I?" So I really didn't know. And then I went to my parents and I was like, "Are you Sunni? Are you Shia? What are you?" And then I discovered that my father is actually Shia, my mother is Sunni. And I never knew that. And when you hear the news, like all these Shia militia, Sunni militia, you'd never think Iraq at some point was a very, like these two sects lived harmlessly. Like really, we didn't have any conflict. Actually, most of my aunts and uncles are actually married to people from the other sects. You can hardly find families that are completely segregated in like sectarian way. The Iraqi community, unlike other countries around it, like the other countries around it, they are very sensitive to this issue. In Iraq, we didn't have a problem with it at all. So, actually, you could expect that someone has a parent, one Shia, one Sunni, to actually know more about it. I really didn't know until I was 13. And I think, to me, the reason that I knew by then was not random encounter. It was something that happened because by that time, the Ba'ath regime, or Saddam's regime, launched what's called the Regain the Faith campaign. And what it did is that introduced a lot of religious classes into schools, into primary schools, middle schools, high schools. It actually empowered a lot of Sunni groups, not the Shia ones, because of the worry of the connection with Iran, which also contributed to more segregation of the Shia and like feeling of a conspiracy behind the line. And also other things that they did in a kind of to encourage the society to become more conservative. Even like they introduced punishments that we didn't really have, like the beheadings, cutting the hand. They were like strongly enforced to kind of enforce it as a way we're following the Islamic Sharia, which we were like we were kind of a secular country, but we were still Muslim by then. But even before Saddam, we were still Muslim, but we were focused on being secular at the time. But this was a change. Everyone could feel it. We could feel it because even the dress, the attire changed. Like we could see people like there's waves of women going into wearing hijab. Even there was some. We started seeing even niqab, which is like the face covering that you can only show the eye. And we didn't. We rarely had that, especially in the capital of Baghdad. And again, this is my view of what's going on. So this happened, and this increased. I mean, when this happens around the age where you're growing up and you're a teenager, and you saw your older cousins go have the fun college life and the fun high school life, and you got nothing. So you get a little bit kind of disappointed, and it creates a conflict. I was lucky by the time that I actually read a book, a poem book. It was amazing, by a poet named Nazar Kabani. He's like one of the most famous poets in the Middle East. And I read his book, and he talks about a lot of things. I mean, of course, love, sex, politics, but most importantly, he talks about how unjust we treat women in our society. How like everything is biased toward the men, how much we're afraid of women, how much we're afraid of sex itself, how afraid of being liberal. We treat women as a slave, as a treasure that you win in a battle and go to, like something that belongs to the bed in the kitchen, to make it simple. And he writes beautiful poems about it. He has a poem that the name of it is Revolt, which is encouraging the woman to actually revolt. And then when I read it, it actually changed a lot of things in me when I read it, because I was instantly aware of how much there are double standards. Why am I when we were growing up at the same, we have the similar ages, me and my sisters, and I was riding up, I was still be able to ride a bike, go mix in the social scene and do everything, but there are things that my sister, as they grew older, they were not allowed to do. And it created a conflict in me. I was like, why am I, like, just because I'm a man, I'm allowed to do these things and I'm not? Well, it created a conflict. I didn't resolve the conflict because whenever I ask a question, you get this stern look from your parents or your teachers, and it doesn't encourage you to question. Especially when everyone in the community agrees that this is the way we should teach our children to act. So, I mean, I'm just telling you that at some point in my life I had some issues with sexism, and probably I had a little bit homophobia by then. But homophobia is kind of genetic. Like when you're born in these areas, like you're instantly trained to see this as perversion or as something that is bad. So that is one of the things that I had. But I was lucky though, because I still describe myself as lucky because I wasn't racist or xenophobic. My father, who's Muslim, was still Muslim, and this is something I want to encourage everyone to consider. My father, who's Muslim, he raised me to be a humanist. He told me, like, when we went to mosque, we always listen to these hate speeches about the Jews, and hate speeches about, like, Shia, or if we go to the other mosque, we hate speech around the Sunnah. And my father taught me, don't listen to any hate speech toward any race or anyone. And this is how he taught me. He says, he grew up in a house where his neighbors were Muslim, Christian, and Jew, and he, like, I think the times that he talked about his Jewish neighbors were like 100,000 times more than with a little bit of exaggeration, than the Muslims and the Christian neighbors. So he was sad, he was like so sad that they had to leave Iraq when Jews got deported from Iraq in around late 40s or probably early 50s. So this is how he raised me, and he's Muslim. So when people tell you in the media that Islam conflicts with humanism, I know most of you don't agree with that, and you've already, some of you, stated that there are things you can debate, there are things you can, that doesn't encourage you. You're freer. For me personally, I felt freer when I left religion. I felt freer to be a humanist without religion, but that doesn't mean that there are no humanists that are religious, or that people that are not doing good with still religion. So this is the thing that we should always keep in mind, but it's very hard. Even for me, who was at some point a Muslim. So having these conflicts, having this, we're going back a little bit, about this, read for this poem, this all poem, beautiful poems, but never had the chance to work on it because I was so busy in school, studying, getting high grades, and then going into medical school, which again I had to graduate, and then I was actually a surgical, cardiovascular surgery resident. So I never got the chance to actually focus on solving these problems because you need time. There is a quote from an Iraqi writer, famous Iraqi writer. His name is, he's also a sociologist, and his name is Ali Wardi, and he wrote something that if you don't leave the environment you grew up in, and if you read only the books that agree with your pre-held beliefs, you are never trusted to be unbiased in your judgment. And this was exactly the truth for me. I never changed my opinion about anything I grew up in. I had questions, I had conflicts, but I never changed my opinion until I had to leave Iraq for fear of my life. And when an Iraqi tells you that they had to leave Iraq in 2009 for fear for their lives, means something serious. Because I've already survived 4 wars, a sectarian war, a lot of threats because my dad was a deputy minister, a bomb thrown at the house, bullets fired at us, but I never left. And I was still wanting to become that doctor that will save millions of lives by staying in Iraq. So there has to be something serious that I actually left overnight and left Iraq. And then one night, I'm a cardiovascular resident. The second night, I'm a UN refugee, and a number. And here where I would call the limbo stage of my life. Are you familiar with the term limbo? It's one of the terms that I'm very comfortable with because of the movie Inception, but I've probably not already seen Inception. Yeah. So I really there was no, when I started the refugee, I went into a country and everyone was telling you they've been here for 5 years waiting for their US visa, refugee visa to get to the US. And you'd be like, wow, I'm 27, in 5 years I'll be 32, and then I will get the visa. I've wasted the most prominent years of my life when I got to the US. And this is how I thought about it. And then I'd like to learn that actually no. There's no prominent years of your life, but that is how I thought about it when I got to Jordan. When you get there as a UN refugee, and this is where actually our next speaker will actually have more idea about what's going on. You're not giving real visibility. There is no timeline. They will tell you your case is in the UN in the process of this, but there is no timeline for how much this process takes. Exactly, it can take from 1 month up to years. I've seen people in security check for 5 years. I've seen people that have done the first interview to the second interview within 2 months, and then there are people that have done from the first interview to the second interview in 6 years. There are people my friend who's now in California, he waited for 11 years to get to the US. Yeah, and these are the thing that and this was a conflict for me because I want to produce something. I have this huge, I have a surgical talent that I'm proud of, but I have this huge incentive to build something. But then, if I build something in Jordan, the country that doesn't give me residency or permanent residency or doesn't give me a citizenship, then I have to leave it, and then all my work is gone. So how am I encouraged to contribute if I'm just in this transitionary? If you are labeled as transitionary, you're never gonna really have the incentive to do something. And this is how I woke up every day for 2.5 years. The only thing that I gained from Jordan is that I had a lot of time to think about all the conflicts that I had. And the conflict became more visible because apart from trying to work as a doctor also in Jordan, and I had to go in rural areas, I also had to find other jobs. And one of the jobs that I luckily found, was to help someone with their international tourism guide business that they were running. And it was just a startup, so we got to decide everything, and I got to mix with people from all the cultures and hear where it goes. I met people from all over the world, and I get to be exposed to people from different opinions that had different lives than me, only to figure out that just because you have a different opinion doesn't mean that you're wrong. Or just because you were raised differently or grew up in a different culture doesn't mean that if you're different than the way I was raised, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. And this is how I thought before. And that is exactly how I thought before. I thought that if you were not raised the way that we are raised, you would be perverted, you would be just overtly. This is how I thought at the time, but it wasn't the case. And I would meet people and I would fall in love with them, how much humanity, how much it's energy to change the world that they have. And still, they were not religious, they were not raised the way I was raised. So that has kind of put me into the conflict again. But this time I had all the time to think about it. So it was perfect. One of the things that caused me a conflict was evolution. I was sitting on a table, I'm the doctor, everyone was sitting there was not a doctor, was not trained in biology or anything related to evolution, and one of them said, oh yeah, he's mentioned something about this thing evolved, and I was like, oh wow, he doesn't really believe that evolution is true. But I didn't say it, I kept it to myself, and then another person commented, there was a guy from Japan, 2 people from France, 1 person from the US, and 1 person from the US that actually believes in evolution. And then also 2 people from Russia, and they all agreed that evolution was a fact. And I was like, I'm the only medical trained doctor, and I believe that it is a hoax. And so I went back home. I felt shy to say anything. I just went back home, and I studied evolution to prove that it's wrong. Only to find out, you probably know that it's wrong. So I failed. So And then I asked myself, if that is one thing that I was taught that was wrong, what other things that I could have been taught that was wrong? And then I found out that I was actually trained in a method that one Christian priest in the 1970s, he prescribed it as God of the gaps. That is how I raised. Like every question that I had, every question that no one could answer for me, they would tell you, God did it. And this is the God of the gaps. And I was like, oh my God, I have all these gaps in my knowledge that are filled with God did it, God did it, God did it. And here what I was like, I have all this information to fill right now. And everything that I learned, it stole some power from the God that I had in mind. Because this is like if you build your God as an answer to everything that you don't know, and it's kind of, I'm saying a quote by Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I mean it's a combination of quotes from Neil deGrasse Tyson and Christopher Hitchens. I mean your God's going to shrink with the more knowledge you gain. So this is how I felt, and the more I knew, oh, there's the Big Bang. I thought that was completely like just a theory. You probably heard that, just a theory thing. And then I kind of, I mean, you probably could tell, like I left religion gradually until I actually I was comfortable saying to myself only that I'm an atheist. And then it was very close to the time that I was going to the US, so it was perfect because I didn't have to suffer a lot as an atheist in Jordan. So I left to the US. I was only 1 month into the US. I got my visa. I found out that the US was not really ready to receive a doctor that is trained in cardiovascular surgery. They were not ready. They were very happy that he's here, and like even the officer at the airport. When this is an emotional moment for me. I cannot tell how many times I cried telling these people. The police officer when I came there, like he said, "Welcome home," and I cried. No. I really cried, and because like it's like you leave your country, you lost your connection with your country anymore, and you lost even like a lot of things that you used to believe in your country, and then your country doesn't even do the same to you. It's not the same anymore to you. And even when I left it, people tell you that they have homesickness when they leave their countries. I was actually sick of it by the time I left, so I didn't have homesickness. So, but to find out that I will have a new home, that was amazing. And that the first person I see, that first American face that I see, and he's an officer, and people tell you all these things about officers, and he says, "Welcome home, son." And I was like so happy. I was so happy, and then I went into, it was in Chicago, by the way, and then I went there, I went inside the US, and I found out that actually they were not ready to receive me, because there is no easy process to actually get my skills, employ my skills, and get it integrated in the US health system. The only thing they told me is that you have to study on yourself for 2 years. We won't pay you anything. You will be paying for your expenses, everything, and then you'll study by yourself. And then after that, you will, if you get really good grades, like high grades, you may apply for residency matching, and it's a process of interviewing a lot of people, and you may get the chance. And then if you get a chance to be resident, you'll repeat your residency all over again. That is what I was offered when I got to become. And that, I mean, to put it into context, that is 2 years of like how much I would spend, $25,000, and then matching itself, the process of matching costs $15,000 to apply for schools. And so that is around $65,000, and they expect a refugee to come up with that money. Yeah. So I didn't go this way. I started working as a contract interpreter right away as I got there. I was so happy because I got a job that is fairly beneath my skill. Like I could speak English by the time I got to the US. I hope you can tell. And then I actually worked as an interpreter. I would help people in hospitals. And then I learned that actually I don't want to become a doctor in the US. It's not of interest to me at all. It's too demanding. There's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of defensive medicine. So I didn't want to work as a doctor in the US. I loved working as a doctor in Iran. What I was interested in when I was working in healthcare as an administrator. So I transitioned my views and I was looking for an MHA degree, and which I got later when I moved to Houston. I mean, not got, I got into a program of MHA. But in there, during the first few months, I came out publicly as an atheist. I was still waiting for some money from my family to send me to pay for my bills and stuff. But then they, on Facebook, on some stupid post, and I was a Facebook warrior. I was like one of those people that, oh, you're wrong. And like, there's a lot of people that are wrong, and I have to prove that I'm right. And then I have to tell them all this information that I have, the enlightenment that I went through. I want to share it with all the world. We created actually a Facebook page that went from like few thousand, called The Enlightened Minds. It's in Arabic, and that went from few thousand fans to 250,000 fans. Wow. Yeah, within a few months. And all we did was translate research, articles, codes that encourage free thinking and skepticism, which is a word I actually learned after. I didn't know what skepticism would be. Only after I actually had to fill my knowledge gaps, which is very weird. Like, why wouldn't you teach a generation to be skeptic? Like, it's the first thing I would teach someone that is just growing up. I mean, I'm not gonna say my kid, but
little you use.
Yeah, and then so. When I announced that, actually my family disowned me, and I had to live on bean cans and tuna cans for like a while. But then I got a job and I could pay for myself. And this also was one of the things that I felt we don't offer social integration also for refugees, because I came in already, let's say, enlightened. I came in already I am aware. I don't need to leave religion to be enlightened. I don't need to leave, but I came in already aware of politics of the U.S., what is a Democrat, what is a Republican, Jon Stewart, all of these things. I already knew that. Yeah. I was watching a late night show by that time. So, but what I really learned is that, which is I know, the priority is to bring them here, which is a big priority because you're saving their life. But if you're not also empowering them and offering them a real chance of social integration, they're just going to shrink back into these conservative, segregated communities that will separate itself from the rest of the American people, and that will learn nothing. And they will probably even go into developing, taking all the bad habits they got from home and making them, what do you call them, morals. They become their morals, their values, and instead of their habits. Like if you examine segregated, extreme communities in here, they are more extreme, and they're more corrupt than the ones that we have back home. And that is it's very obvious. Like when I was working with refugees, I was interpreting for the people that didn't. When I was working as an interpreter, when I was as an interpreter for the refugees. It was the first thing that came to my mind when I was interpreting, because the people that mostly need Arabic interpreter, they were the ones that lived in these segregated societies. They were not the refugees that just came in here. And then I would go there and I would talk to them, and they talked about things that we have settled even in our own country back home, but they haven't got the chance to settle because they were living away from school, away from social interaction in the community,